Jacob names the place. When he says, "This is the house of God," the word Bethel means house of God, Bethel. And from that point on, Bethel becomes known as a holy place, a thin place where God draws close to man. Jacob comes back here at the end of today's class to pay his respects to God at Bethel. Let's see. The Ark of the Covenant lies here for a while. After the conquest, it's a big deal during the conquest. And 1,000 years in the future, King Jeroboam sets up his golden calf here and he wants to divert people away from Jerusalem. And that kind of ruins Bethel as a holy pilgrimage spot. All right, how are we doing? Okay, Jacob marries Rachel and Leah.
Marriage two at the same time?
It wasn't his choice, but yes, they were a package deal. And here's the story. It's a good one. After the dreaming of the stairway to heaven, Jacob arrives in Haran and stops at the local well. Always a good place to meet a woman. The shepherds are complaining how they need help to roll back that heavy stone that opens the well. This well doesn't seem to be a well dug in the ground. Instead, it's a kind of spring that they block off when they're not using it. So while they're all waiting around complaining, Jacob sees Rachel coming with her flock of sheep. It is love at first sight. Jacob stands up and performs a feat of strength for her, rolling the stone away on his own so that living water can flow. He comes up to Rachel. He kisses her. He weeps. He tells her who he is and why he has come, and she runs to tell her family. Now, you've heard the engagement stories of Isaac and Rebekah at the well, and Jacob and Rachel at the well. Think of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well. Jesus meets the Samaritan woman at the well and greets her with the words, "Give me a drink." Her line should be, incidentally, "Yes, and here's some for your camels too." But Jesus doesn't have any camels, so she says, "What are you talking to me for?" And Jesus replies, "You should ask me for living water." He prompts her into the Jacob story. And the Samaritan woman says, "What, you think you're greater than Jacob who gave us this well?" They both know exactly what story they're living, that they're replaying. That is why the disciples were shocked to come back and find Jesus apparently flirting with this Samaritan woman. Jesus was looking for his bride, and he found his bride. And when the bride realizes who he is and what he's come for, she ran to tell the whole town. She's us. We're the bride of Christ. We're the sinner, the outsider, the one Christ has come for. He calls us. So, Jacob is madly in love with Rachel. He goes home to her father and makes a deal with Laban. Never make a deal with Laban. Laban is as tricky as Rebekah and Jacob put together. Because Jacob has no money, Laban says that if you work for me for 7 years with no wages, I'll give you Rachel at the end of it. And so Jacob works for 7 years, and they seem but a few days because of the love he has for her. But on the wedding night, Laban puts the veil on Rachel's older sister Leah and brings her to Jacob. In the darkness of night, after the ceremony, Jacob was probably confused. He's thinking, this doesn't sound like Rachel. It sounds like her sister. But that's Rachel's clothes. Are you Rachel? Of course I'm Rachel. And Jacob marries Leah. You see any parallels? When Jacob steals the birthright from Esau, he goes to his father and tricks him, dresses up. Isaac's confused, hears the voice. See, yeah.
Okay.
Same thing here.
He got a taste of his own medicine.
Yep, he absolutely got a taste of his own medicine. Identity switch. Laban pulls it on Jacob, and Jacob falls for it. And in the morning, Jacob wakes up and sees who's lying next to him. And he is outraged. "What have you done to me?" he says to Laban. And Laban replies blandly, "Oh, in our country, it is not the custom to marry the younger sister before the firstborn." Ouch. Oh, Jacob wanted the rights of the firstborn. He got the rights of the firstborn. Jacob, the schemer, has been out-schemed by the master. Laban says that once his wedding week with Leah is over, yes, he can marry Rachel too. He did promise him Rachel. But now he's got to work another 7 years for Leah. And Jacob does. Laban gets another 7 years of slave labor out of Jacob, and he keeps his daughters nice and close. But his scheme destroys his family. Imagine Rachel's feelings toward her father and toward Leah. Rachel, I don't know that she ever forgives her father. And Leah goes along with it. Leah could have told Jacob. She didn't. Leah was the ugly older sister. She didn't think she'd ever find someone to marry her. She wanted to get married, and she was willing to put up with this humiliating scheme to get herself a husband. She goes along with it. Rachel's got to be furious with her too. What about Leah? How does Leah feel toward her father? Well, he probably coerced her into this. Maybe she wanted to get married to Jacob or anyone. I think the implication is that she would have been happy to be married to anyone. But her father coerced her into this, made her lie, made her dress up, made her ruin her relationship with her sister. And their jealousy only gets worse after the marriage. Jacob loves Rachel, not Leah. Now God hears the cries of Leah the unloved and gives her lots of children to love. And it's Leah, not Rachel, who becomes the mother of Judah and carries on the line of Jesus. Leah hopes that somehow all her children will earn her Jacob's love. It's really sad to read. Now my husband will honor me because I have borne him 6 sons. Well, the first 5 didn't do much good. Rachel, meanwhile, is infertile. She and Leah have fights over who gets the mandrake root, thought to be an aphrodisiac, and who gets to spend the night with Jacob tonight. They do kind of a close-in on these fights that they must have had all the time. Rachel is filled with jealousy over Leah's children. And so she gives Jacob her maid to have children with, just like Sarah did to Abraham. Not to be outdone, Leah gives Jacob her maid to have children with. By the end of it, Jacob ends up with 12 sons. God also hears the cries of Jacob the oppressed. He's made himself a slave laborer to his uncle to win Rachel. For 14 years he works. And Laban keeps trying to cheat Jacob. After a while, he starts giving Jacob wages. He's got to once his 14 years are up. But he keeps changing his wages. He comes up with new rules for which sheep he can keep and not keep. And God keeps rewarding Jacob. Laban comes up with the rule, okay, any of the sheep that are spotted, you can keep the sheep with spots. Suddenly all the sheep are born with spots. I meant stripes. Those, you need striped sheep. Suddenly all the sheep are born with stripes. God is with Jacob. God gives Jacob supernatural prosperity and protects him from Laban's greedy schemes. After 20 years, Jacob is exceedingly rich. And Laban is starting to get not so happy with him. Then the Lord tells Jacob, return to the land of your fathers, and I will be with you. Jacob brings this to Rachel and Leah and says, the Lord has told me to return. And they say, it's about time. Our father has cheated you over and over again. He's treated us like foreigners. He's spent our bride price. We need to leave. The next time Laban leaves town on business, they flee. Laban pursues them. But God speaks to Laban in a dream. Say not a word to Jacob, either good or bad. I suppose if Laban had followed the letter of that, he'd have gone home. But the commentary I read said Laban takes it as do not get into a hostile confrontation with Jacob. Don't you dare do what you were thinking about doing. So Laban still finds Jacob. But when he catches up to him, he attempts to guilt him and sweet talk him. What have you done? You have cheated me. Oh, my beautiful daughters. You've carried away my daughters like captives of war. Why did you not tell me you wanted to go? I would have thrown you a party. We would have feasted you and brought out the tambourines and the lyre. Well, you'd have brought out a lyre anyway. And then he switches tactics. You know, it would be in my power to harm you, but But God has told me that I am not to say a word to you, either good or bad. Jacob has a few words for Laban. I knew you'd never let us go in peace. All these years you've cheated me. You've changed my wages 10 times. God saw my affliction. God is on my side. And God rebuked you last night so you can't lay a hand on me. Laban accepts the rebuke. Laban and Jacob make a covenant of peace and part ways. After 20 years, Jacob has developed confidence in God. Those 20 years must often have seemed pointless. Maybe Jacob wondered if God had forgotten him, but Jacob learned humility. Jacob learned patience. And God has blessed Jacob like he promised he would. Jacob has the woman he loves. He has children. He has wealth. And now he's coming home. And as Jacob enters the promised land, he sees an angel army of God coming to meet him. God is keeping all the promises he made the night Jacob saw the stairway to heaven. God is with him. God has not forgotten him.